Hey everyone, welcome back to the Awesome Life Podcast. I'm Karen Steltz, your host. And as always, the Awesome Life Podcast, I love to have my guests here because they share such wisdom, such hope. And that's what we are in need of, especially in this day and age. Inspiration, hope, resources. And that's what my guest and I do on the Awesome Life Podcast. Now, many of my listeners are entrepreneurial leaders because that's who I coach and love and are with. But they struggle sometimes with being able to have SOPs, standard operating procedures, having those simple things, and they are simple when we allow them to be simple. Except in my case, when they're not always that simple because tech issues get in the way. But that's another story we might get into in a while. But today I am with the most amazing, wonderful man. His name is Karl Staib. Did I say that right?
You did. He nailed it.
Yay! I'm getting better. So let me tell you a little bit about Karl. With over a decade in process design across online and brick and mortar businesses, Karl specializes in helping small business owners remove friction in their businesses by designing better processes. Utilizing AI, stream living, SOPs, and developing roadmaps. He gets great results. Great results actually don't come from total home runs, guys. They come from doing small things very well. And that's why I love, love, love Karl, because we connected. He allowed me to be on his podcast, and I am thrilled to return the favor and having him on mine because his wisdom is so amazing. So welcome, Karl. I really appreciate you being here. But tell me, how did you get into SOPs?
Good question. So kind of stumbled into it over time. So I'm 47 now, but when I was a kid, my father, my German father, was born in Germany, moved to Australia when he was 12 because it was after war and torn Germany and after World War II. So they couldn't make it. Well, they struggled in Australia, so they came to America, and he found his path in the Navy. So he served in the Navy, and it was one of those where you could have different jobs, of course. And he started to learn the trade of being an electrician. That is how I grew up, going on the job Saturday mornings. I go work with my dad. I would say at least every other weekend, depending if I had sports or something like that. But most weekends, I would be working with him, and he was very process oriented. If anybody knows a straight from Germany German, they are very process driven.
They are. They just have everything down, clean, neat.
Yes.
Don't make
Yeah.
it so difficult. I love
Y-
that.
Yeah. And so I started, I think it was in college. Was starting taking business classes. I kind of stumbled into Peter Drucker. Didn't really think much about it. I love the idea of processes, especially in manufacturing. But I worked out of college for a valve company. It was in marketing, but they were a German company as well. And they were very process driven. And so as the years have gone by, I've, started different businesses, and where I kept noticing, and this is a really important point for people listening, especially people in their 20s and 30s, is watching the patterns. They're patterns that come from strengths, the things that they do well. And I love writing, but I am not great writer. I'm a good writer. And I really, when I was in my 20s, I wanted to be the next Dr. Seuss and the next Charles Bukowski, who's a poet. And through that, just discovering myself, I landed a job in design for a Fortune 500 company, and just kept watching and journaling. Helping this large institution with in design, I noticed I had a really good knack for service design, process design. And so I just kept at it, kept trying things. And what I realize is most entrepreneurs really aren't process driven. They are struck by the idea and they're like, oh, I can help solve this problem. And it might be, designing a new type of chair for people. It might be, a certain app out there. And, as anybody knows, apps are really design heavy because you have to make it user friendly.
Mhm.
And so over the years, what I've realized is people are really good with the product, but not so much from the organizational standpoint. So as you're building up your team, what ends up happening is a lot of things get lost in translation. A lot of things aren't communicated because those processes haven't been put in place, those SOPs. For example, I worked at a company. Every time we'd have a meeting, we start with what's called a mission moment. And we wouldn't always, say, my father was in the Navy, but the mission moment could just be remembering that what our mission and this company was. And so seeing things like that, seeing retrospectives, retrospectives is, when you work for a large tech company, they work in 2-week increments. And so they will plan out for 2 weeks and then they'll execute upon that work. And then within 2 weeks, you're hoping to meet that deadline. And then when that 2 weeks ends, you then bring in more stories that you'll work on, which is like projects. And then what you do is you then start to see these patterns. How much capacity does this team have? What are they good at doing? And this is the type of things that most companies can do if they just put these small things in place. And what you said at the beginning, it's not hitting home runs. Like you can create a fantastic product, but the companies that really succeed are the ones that do the little things well. They onboard their employees so they have a really clear understanding of what their role is. They onboard their customers. So, if you've ever gotten an Apple product, you know what a good onboarding experience is, how easy it is to set up the device, the packaging it comes in. It's like, this fancy packaging and everything, you pull this tab and everything just kind of opens up and it's just beautiful. And you're like, oh, well, all these things can be applied in our own businesses. And that's what I love doing. You start to see what these standards are, standard operating procedures. And a lot of times people don't think about all these little things and how they add up. And I like to think of it as compound interest. So if anybody's familiar with investing, if you have $1,000 in the stock market and then it makes $100, you now have $1,100, but now you're making compound interest. So instead of just making money on that $1,000, now you're making money on 1,100. So next time you might make $100 and 20. So now you have 1,220. Well, the same thing goes with your processes. So you do these little things well, and you constantly find ways to improve them. Then you're going to figure out where you can start to put more of your energy and what to let go of, because a lot of people don't even think about that.
So that's makes such sense, such sense. Now, when you meet with somebody in a company or an individual, a small business, what would be the first thing that you would do? Would you look at something like looking at your day, or how do you start, or what would you do first
Yeah.
thing?
So it starts with this assessment. You're like,
Mhm.
where are they seeing the most friction? And where is that friction coming from? And sometimes that friction might be at the customer level, might be at the employee level. And so you look at all these different friction points inside your company. And then what you do is you map out the impact and feasibility of each area. So usually companies will focus on customers because those customers, if they don't keep coming back and buying, or if they don't say, hey, leave a review on Yelp or Google, a good review, then they're not going to come back, or they're not going to help you spread that word. So you've got to get those done first. So that's usually where most companies start, is at the customer level. But then you have to figure out, okay, once you start looking at all the different ways you can improve the customer experience, then you have to say, okay, what are some of the ideas that we have? And then what we do is we map it. We say, okay, how feasible is this? Well, one company we did is, we talked about, this was more from an employee standpoint, more from culture, but they didn't really have, a lot of systems in place for onboarding an employee. They were young. They were, I think, only like 5, 6 years old, starting to grow faster. And they didn't think about all these things that they had to put in place. It was just go at it, go as fast as you can, try to not trip and fall. And so they started putting these things in place. And so we just came up with ideas, all the different ways you can create a better experience for new employee coming on, what they need to do, how they need to do it, what is the vision of the company, what is the mission, explain the core values with them. And then we had a process for the leaders to find out their core values of the employee, so they could figure out how the team's values, employees' values lined up to the company's values. And
Oh,
so
brilliant.
then what we did, we started retaining more employees, because now they had things in place. And most people were built to want to see progress. And if you can see everything's in place and you're making progress in a company, like your role, how you do it, then you know that you're delivering on the work that you say you can do. But the people who are also tracking that work can see that your work is making an impact. And then that's when everything starts clicking for the company.
Oh, that is brilliant. Yeah, to be able to work with your employees, because the fact is that yes, you have to have customers, but you have to have employees, but more so, you have to have the employees in the right place, on the same page, wanting to do what you as the leader, as the owner of the company, want to have happen. And
Yes.
that requires inspiration, understanding, getting down to those core values. That is because if you have somebody, and correct me, I mean, I'm just spouting off here, but if you have somebody whose core values do not match the company's, you're not going to have a very good employee, I wouldn't think.
Yeah. And this is little things that add up, that you can do and do them consistently, that help you create that culture. So it's funny you say that, because this company had hired somebody, thought they were great, and they realized their values were completely different. This company was very fast paced, money driven. And this person, they came from a nonprofit and they were not driven by money. And it was a clash. And no one really saw that until they looked at the values and were like, so what was funny is they didn't fire, they just had a conversation. They're like, look, like, we're seeing this, like, your patterns don't match this. You don't come from this startup land. And uh, what should we do? And she's like, you're right. And she ended up leaving, and they didn't have to fire her, and it was a mutual respectful decision on both sides. And the employer was really great about it. They paid her severance for 2 weeks, and they helped her try to find another job.
Super. So they
Yeah.
were working together to solve a problem. It wasn't really a problem. It was a realization that neither one of them were going to move forward if they stayed in the same situation as it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. And that's part of leadership too, isn't it? Being able to say, yeah, I see that this is not the same core values. This is not where you should be. Um, and we will help you find something that is, so that you can
Mhm.
be happy and grow, as well as us finding somebody who help us grow more.
Yeah.
Is
And then
that
she doesn't post on TikTok how crappy this company is. And she doesn't, she feels, cared for. She felt respected. And everybody, now they found somebody that's a much better fit. And it's all because you just bring that stuff to the surface. You talk about that stuff. And this is sometimes having those tough conversations is difficult, but if that's part of the culture, if that's the process that you've put in place, and that's what is expected of these leaders, to have these type of conversations, then that just becomes the standard, and that's what really makes a great company.
fantastic? So when you put all these things into place, you go through, you find their values and where they want to go in their business, and what their daily things that they do each day, and how it helps or it may not help, or whatever. Then what do? Do you create some sort of manual for them, or
Mm.
how do you make sure that it isn't, hey, this is great, Carl, love everything you did, bye, and no, we're not going to do anything.
Mhm.
You
It's
know?
funny that you say that. Like, some of the work I've done is helping companies create leadership manuals. So when somebody new comes onto the team, they have a one sheeter, and that one sheeter basically says, "These are my values as a leader. These are my beliefs. These are some of my hobbies, and all these things that matter to this leader." And now the employee, like how they like communication. Do they prefer Slack? Do they prefer text, email? All these things, it's right there on day one. So you don't have to figure these out over the next 2 months of like, is it okay if I do this? It's nerve wracking to figure out what a company culture is like, what a boss is like. You don't know. You're accepting this job thinking, but a lot of times there's just it's a misalignment in a lot of ways if you're not upfront. And so then, a lot of times I suggest even for leaders to share it in the interview. This is my one sheeter. This is the type of person I am. Can you handle this? Some leaders want to be able to text their employees at 7 o'clock at night, and maybe they expect a return, and especially in finance, right? Or especially in IT, because you might be, if you have network outages down. But the idea is having these things in place. But to go back to your original question, is once we start to find all these friction points, we start to figure out what's going on, where is there lag, where can we start to kill things, where can we start to put more energy into things. Then we create basically a roadmap that says we are going to work on these things. And I usually like to do it in 3-month increments. It doesn't have to be, depending on the company. If you're a pool cleaning company and you're doing these, and it's your summer super busy, you're not going to probably get too caught up in your processes, right? You're going to
Mm.
just service the customers. But then as the fall comes and everything starts to slow down, then you can start to put these things in place. So maybe you have this 4-month gap where you're not. So you might work in 2-month increments then, because then you have more free time to kind of get everything set up for back in May when everything starts to pick back up. But you create this roadmap and say, we are going to tackle these things from a company perspective. And then you say, what's most important? And this is where a lot of companies, I think, fall short, is they don't have a priority list. And
Mhm.
it's one of the most baffling things to me is like, what's your top priority? Our customers. Okay. What does that mean? And they can't really explain what that means. So you have to be able to break it down and say, okay, if your customers are your top priority, do you have like a customer onboarding experience? Well, yeah, we do these things, but it's not documented, it's not written down, it's kind of haphazard. So the idea then is to really have clear documentation, how it all works. And then you can start to say, okay, over these 3 months, we're going to tackle these things. And then, but you might want to do it in, 1 week blocks. You might want to do it in 2 week blocks, depending on the company. And then you start to just chip away. And back to the originals, doing the small things well, what ends up happening is you start to tackle these things every single day. And this is what the Japanese call kata. So it's called continuous improvement. So this is a famous Toyota principle. But the idea is every day, if you're looking for things to improve, it just becomes part of the culture. Because what can happen is a lot of people get complacent. A lot of people are afraid to try new things. But if the culture is built in that failure is okay if you're trying to improve, because you might try 5 things and 4 of them fail, but that's okay because the 5th thing worked and it saved the company, $180,000 that year. Well, worth it.
It might be absolutely worth it. So it's kind of important, if I understand what you're saying, this is the reason it's very important to get things working in a good habitual way, an understanding way. But it's also important to go back and review all of those procedures and make sure that they're still relevant in this particular time or space, as you were saying, in a cleaning company. Perhaps in the summertime it's very busy, but in the fall we need to reevaluate what our needs, our desires, where our future wants to be, and what we need to do to make that happen. Am I understanding you correctly?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because if you're not looking back on that stuff, it's, we learn from the past so we can, make a better future, and
Mhm.
it's we always talk about learning from history. We have history in our own lives, and if anybody journals out there who's listening, if you look at your journal every couple weeks or every month and you start to look at what you're writing about, maybe what you're complaining about, what makes you happy, you'll start to see patterns. And those patterns is really what can help drive you to make those improvements. And then over time, just like in a person, an individual, or in a business, you start to then say, okay, here's our focus. Here's what we're gonna focus on. Like the if somebody's gonna start an exercise practice, you don't start with jogging an hour a day. You start with going for a walk for 10 minutes a day. You keep it super simple, keep it
Mhm.
small. And one thing that's really important for people who are listening and they're leaders, if they run a small team or a small business, you don't want to change too many things at once. What you want to do is, if you're thinking, I want to change the customer experience, within, create a better experience within those first 2 months, whatever it is, you don't try 3 things or 4 things, you try one thing. And then until you have enough data that you feel comfortable that this is a good change. Because if you try 3 things, you don't know why they're sticking around longer. And this is that methodical German methodical brain that that I've been given, really focuses on is just staying really clear on, okay, this is the one thing. And it's so easy to get distracted by shiny objects. You hear somebody trying something, they added AI to their process, which is great, and we should, but right now, if that's not the most important thing, to create a better customer experience, then leave that off the list. Try one thing, make sure, might take a month. It might take 6 weeks to see if that change really helped the company. But the idea is to kind of wait, see, get that data, review that data, talk it over, and then say, okay, yeah, this really helped. It might not. Then this is that retrospective that we've talked about is, okay, why didn't this work? What is our hypothesis? And this is where it can get fun. This is
Yeah.
this is the fun. People don't think about how much fun it can be to have a hypothesis. When we're kids, this is like what we do all day long. It's just like, if I tried this, if I put this ball here and I jumped off the couch and I landed on the ball, I want to see what will happen, right? And this is the beauty of owning your own business, of being a leader, is being able to have these different hypotheses, try these fun things out, and then just have a system in place that allows you to say, okay, after 4 weeks, let's review the data. Let's see what came in. And then you can say, oh, okay, how about if we tweaked it a little bit here? And that's usually, it's not the first idea. Sometimes it's not even the second idea. It's usually like the third idea of like, because you're starting to get that feedback loop going. And that is so valuable when you can do that.
That is so, so true. It's like, what was it? Thomas Edison. And it is a mindset or mind flow, opening up that mind flow for what are the other possibilities. It's not a failure as long as I am learning that this did not work and understanding why it didn't work and what I can do instead. And I think it was Thomas Edison who said that, no, I didn't, when he was making the light bulb and somebody asked him, how did you keep going when you failed 999 times? He said, oh, well, I never failed, number one. I just learned new ways of doing it. I never failed.
Because he kept learning from it. Yeah.
Learning from it. So what would you say? There were a lot of things that popped out to me, but what would you say would be the number one mistake that small business owners make in their business to move forward with great abandon, so to speak?
Yeah. There's so many different types. I'll try to go macro level. I think the key part to all this is really empowering people to try new things. I've seen so many companies where, and this is not just a company-wide issue. It's a people-wide issue. We're afraid to tackle something because if we fail, then we're a failure. We attribute that failure to ourselves. We take an ego hit. Ego gets involved, and man, it's just tough to get stuff done. We're worried that, we're letting people down. We're worried that people will make fun of us. People think we're stupid. I'll tell you right now, I'm one of the dumbest people that you know. And the reason that I succeed is because I just keep on iterating. We talked about, I think before we started, I'm terrible at names. I think you said you're terrible at names too. And if you just own it and you just say, my brain doesn't work like that. I try my best. And then, then you can say, okay, well, how can I lean into my strengths? What can I do well? And it might be, I'm really good at remembering things people tell me, details, and I'm a visual, processor like that. So if someone's like, oh yeah, I went to Cancun and went out on the beach and got stung by a jellyfish, like I'll remember that for years. Versus, someone's name like Kevin or Tom. It's just so there's no visual representation. I can't see a jellyfish come and sting somebody on the bottom of the foot, with a name. I see Henry, and it's tough. So I try different techniques to remember it, but anyway, I digress because it's this one of those things that are tough. But coming back to your question is being able to allow people to try things, allowing yourself to try things, not get caught in a rut, and then possibilities open. And we talked about home runs. This is where home runs come from because you're iterating, you're trying, you're trying, you're trying. Okay, that customer onboarding experience didn't work. We tried to educate them. They don't care about education. Let's try sending them some little, stickers. Let's try sending them a book. Let's try, and you just keep iterating. If the customer paid $5 or something, sending them a book doesn't make sense. But if it's a, high ticket item that's over $1,000, man, sending them a little care package for $29, a book and maybe some coffee or tea or whatever it is, all of a sudden now you're creating a type of onboarding experience. And maybe it's the book that the founder wrote. I don't know, but the idea is you're iterating and you're trying and you're not letting your ego get involved. And you're then saying, okay, yeah, what's next? What can I learn next from this? How can I try? What can I try next? And
I
that's when we come back to seeing progress. Like Edison, he saw progress on that, 853rd time. He's like, wait, what if I try this? And then he tried 854. Oh, let me try. And then all of a sudden you see different ways of doing things. And then it's not about failure. It's just about, okay, what can I do next?
It is looking at the big picture and what is important at this moment in time. I heard a quote today. I have to read it to you. It's you make a living by what you get, but you make a life by what you give.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
I think this is what we are doing in our profession of helping making the world a better place, making businesses run more smoothly, more efficiently, and recognizing that there is no failure. It's an opportunity to do something differently.
Yeah.
And that is what we want. Recognize that we are our own joy. We are our own happiness. And we can do that by giving more, being on the same page, and making sure that both the employees and the customers are happy with the page that you're on.
Yes. Yes.
So I love that. Well, Karl, how can people get in touch with you? Oh, and you did say that you did things online as well as brick and mortar. Is that correct?
Yeah. 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 Like you talked about AI. So, helping a company integrate AI into their processes.
Mm,
So it's a law firm, and this law firm, wants to do a better job of, keeping up with clients. Creating communication takes time. So instead of rewriting the wheel, what they did is they started to create templates, email templates, and then they use AI to um, create little ways to, you can prompt like chat GPT to say, this person um, likes these things, let's put a little joke about that in this email. And what you're doing is you don't have to like think of a joke, but you have to have the process of like going to chat GPT before you send this email, and then placing this joke or placing this comment or this more personal thing in there. Now, one thing that I want to caveat is it's really important to understand the the contextual nature of this response. If it doesn't seem right, don't put it in there. And this is part of that SOP, is creating these things. So you are directing it. If you had an employee that would write an email and that joke is a little risky or a little offbeat, then you have to have ways to catch that. So, putting these processes in place are so important. But yes, it's doing these things with companies. I have a cybersecurity company that I work with, and they like making sure that the companies run safe, but I partner with them and help the companies make sure that they have these processes documented and they have it very clear on who does what and when certain things are done and how these are done. It's so much fun. It's one of those things where once you institute this stuff and you put these things in place, people start to see the value and they're like, I wish I did this years ago. I'm like, I know. Um,
I
and
wasn't old enough to help you back then, but I am now. So, hey, better
yeah,
late than never, right? It's never too
exactly.
late to make a difference. It's never
Yeah.
too late to make a difference.
Yeah. But yes, so I do help people. So if anybody out there, has a online business, or offline too, I've been helping a lot of, cybersecurity, companies. I've been helping, lawyers. I have a music school that I've been helping, which has been fascinating. Um, and I know I have to niche down, but all these, it's tough to say no to these, because it's just fascinating because I get to learn how these companies operate, and that's so much fun. But yes, and if people want to learn more, I have guides. So I have how to create SOPs that don't suck. It's a really easy guide to start your own process around creating SOPs. And then I have a 4X your employee productivity guide, by using an organizational roadmap, which we talked about roadmaps. But the idea is, if they want to, they can go to sopguy.com, and I have an assessment too. So if they reach out, I will give them a free assessment. And what they can do is they can email me with Karl with a Karl at sopguy.com. And I will send them a link. Just put SOP assessment or process assessment, or I like to call it friction-free assessment. But they can put that in there. I'll send them a link, and then I'll hop on the phone with them for a half hour and go through that assessment with them, and where they can start to find some ways to save time, save money, and reduce that friction.
Oh, that is so valuable. So, so valuable for everybody, for people like me who are solo entrepreneurs, and all small businesses out there. And niching down to the small business, if they have, it sounds like if they have employees and they are a small business of maybe 12 employees or less, that's who you would work with? Is that generally at this moment in
Uh,
time?
Usually it's probably between, yeah, I mean, 12, I would say 10 to probably about 90 employees is
Oh, all right.
where is my
Okay.
sweet spot. Yeah, I don't have I'm a one man show. I don't have the infrastructure to work with a Fortune 500 company, but yeah, usually like 100 employees and down, I usually help.
Yeah, that's not small business. That's a good big business. So
Yeah, it's true.
this is
Yeah. So
great. This
I
is
help
great.
this. I have this company. They own 6 hardware stores, and so we're working with them and their processes and their documentation. So yeah, they have. They might. I think they have like 250 employees. I think
Wow.
so. Yeah.
Well, onward and upward,
Yeah.
Karl. I love
Yes.
this.
Yeah.
This is so
Exactly.
great. And thank you. Thank you so much. And his information will be in the show notes below. So please reach out to Karl because he is a font of wisdom. And as you can hear, his personality is open, loving, and that's who I like to work with. Somebody who is understanding and not just saying, no, you're not doing it right. You got to do it this way. You work with your clients.
Yeah,
You make the business work more efficiently. And when you do that, you actually increase your productivity and your bottom line along the way.
exactly.
So,
Yeah.
everyone, please, please, please do reach out to Karl, and I will have that information in the show notes.